So, as seniors advocate, I am often asked, who are seniors and what do they want? And I say that that's a very easy question to ask, but it's a very difficult question to answer. Because why don't you just ask me, who are people and what do they want? The hopes and dreams and aspirations and experiences and expectations of somebody at the age of 65, 85, or 105 is as different and as varied as it is for someone at the age of 25, 45, and 55. The only thing that has changed is that we've taken a group of people who have only one defining characteristic in common, their age. We have grouped them together, we have put a label on them called seniors, and we have made an assumption that they all want the same thing and that there's a single answer to the question, what do seniors want? And that creates stereotyping. And if you reflect on society at large, we would not tolerate stereotyping of people based on singular defining characteristics such as their religion, their ethnicity, their gender, their sexual orientation, their socioeconomic status. We wouldn't stand for it. Yet, we perpetuate it for seniors. And when we do that and create these stereotypes, we do a disservice because we start to think that everybody's the same, when indeed they're very, very different. And so one of the things that I do in my various presentations throughout the province is I like to talk about what are the facts, what is the real picture of seniors in British Columbia today, what is the context, and how does that look different from some of the stereotypes and notions we might have about people. So I start with this silver tsunami that we're talking about, this apocalyptic event that's going to descend upon British Columbia, ending life as we know it today. And everywhere we turn, there's going to be a gray-haired person going, who am I, looking for the nursing home that's going to be on every corner. When in fact, when you look at it, and you look at the numbers, and you look at the projections, and you look at where we've been and where we're going and around the world, maybe not quite as dramatic as some of us want to present. So right now in British Columbia, there's 1 million people, almost 1 million people, age 65 and older. That is about 19 or 20% of the population. So let me put it another way. 8 out of 10 people in British Columbia are under the age of 65. The proportion of people age 65 and older is going to grow, but the population overall is also going to grow. And so we're slowly going to shift in British Columbia over the next 20 years to the point where we're going to have about 25 to 26% of our population is going to be age 65 and older. So let me put it to you another way. When we reach the apex of this tsunami, as people are calling it, for British Columbia anyhow, 3/4 of the population is still going to be under the age of 65. So yes, the proportion is going to grow, but we know what's coming. We can plan for it, and the magic number of 65 doesn't look today the way it looked 50 years ago, and it's not going to look the same 25 or 30 years from now. So I think it's important for us to understand exactly the kind of growth and shift that we're going to be seeing. The other impression that's out there, depending on who you talk to, is that seniors are all rich. They have all this money, and if we could only get them to spend it on themselves and spend for their healthcare needs, we would solve all of our problems. Well, in fact, when you look at the demographic data and you look at the income data, the picture that emerges is, yes, there are some seniors who have a lot of money, but most seniors don't. So in this province, 20% of seniors live in a household with an average income of about $20,000. 20%. 28% of BC seniors are on the Guaranteed Income Supplement, the GIS, which means their total income is below $24,000. At the top end, the top 20% of BC seniors have an average income of $80,000. So the challenge is, how do we ensure equity of care and care services across this vastly different income strata that exists? The other myth that's out there is that if you live long enough, you're going to end up in a nursing home. And in fact, when you look at where people really are living at what age in this province, it's a very different picture. So when we look at 65 and over, 94% of people, over 9 out of 10 people, live completely independently. Now, 65 is arguably the new 40. So I look at age 85 as a marker for many things. And the reason I look at 85 is, there's two reasons. Number one, it's the average age of a person in a nursing home in British Columbia. And secondly, it's the age at which we begin to see through our healthcare data a higher degree of frailty in the population than we see in younger years. At age 85 and older, 75%, 3/4 of British Columbia seniors aged 85 and older in this province live completely independently. It may be in a condominium, it may be in a townhouse, but it's their home. Usually they're owning it, about 80% are homeowners. Sometimes they're renting, but it's their own home. About 10% of people aged 85 and older live in what you think of as a retirement home or assisted living. It's still pretty independent. They usually have a smaller unit, 1 bedroom, maybe a studio. They have a little kitchenette. They come and go as they please. They usually have a couple of meals in a common dining room. 15%, 1/5 of people 85 and older in this province live in a nursing home. That's it. So the statistical odds are that almost everybody in this room is going to live in their own home for the entirety of their life. And for those who plan communities and where people live, we have to remember that overwhelmingly people want to live in their own homes, and overwhelmingly people do live in their own homes for the entirety of their life. The other perception or myth that's out there is that if you live long enough, you're going to lose all your marbles. And in fact, the data look very different. We hear a lot about how the population with Alzheimer's and dementia is going to increase, and you hear about doubling and tripling and very dramatic numbers, and all of those numbers are correct, but context is important. The issue is, what's the probability? And indeed, when we look at the population 85 and older, 8 out of 10 people do not have a diagnosis of dementia. How you want to look at the numbers is going to shape the image that you project. So a person could come in and say with great breathlessness, 2 out of 10 people over 85 have a diagnosis of dementia. 20% of people, almost 1/4 of the population over 85 have dementia. And a very dramatic picture of inevitability will be painted. The numbers are the same. The probability is the same. But think about how your reaction is when you hear that 8 out of 10 people over 85 do not have dementia. So just like the overwhelming probability is that you will live in your own home for the entirety of your life, so is the probability that you will keep your marbles, however many or few they may be, for the entirety of your life. You know, as we get older, we do gain wisdom. But if you were a ditz at 30, you're not going to morph into Mensa material by 90. You're still going to be a bit of a ditz. If you never paid your bills on time at 40, you're not suddenly going to be Johnny Clipboard at 85. But when we go back to the stereotyping, one of the things we're very good at is rushing in and making judgments about people in terms of how they're conducting their life and their business at the age of 85 and 90 that's not conforming with how we think they should be conducting their life and their affairs, without any understanding that that's how they've always been. But our expectation is, oh, if you forgot to pay the hydro bill this month, well, maybe you forgot to pay it when you were 40 as well. Use of the emergency department. So the other impression that's out there is that the emergency departments of this province and this country are just jam-packed with seniors, and they're causing all the problems in the hospital, and that's why everybody has to wait. Well, I hate to let facts get in the way of a good story, but 75% of the people in the emergency departments in this province are under 65. And 94% of the people in the province in emergency departments are under the age of 85. So it's true, if you go to the emergency department and you're 85 or 90 or 95, you're far more likely to get admitted to into the hospital. Your stay is going to be longer. But in terms of who's picking up the phone and calling for the ambulance, the problem isn't being created by seniors. Their use of the emergency department is fairly on par with their population stats. Now here's where the news doesn't get quite so good, and I had dinner last night with a group of people from Learning and Retirement, and I've been talking with Pegasus and a few others this morning as well about transportation. And this is an issue where the magnitude of the problem is greater in communities like Nelson than it is in communities in the Lower Mainland and Southern Vancouver Island, and that's around driver's licenses. So at the age of 65, 90% of us have a driver's license. So we are accustomed to the spontaneity that comes from being able to say, oh, I think I'll go to the grocery store today. Oh, grab my keys, get in the car, drive there. I didn't have to plan it in advance. I didn't have to phone anybody. By the age of 85, the percentage with a driver's license drops to 44%. Now the challenge is, what we know is at 85, most people are still living independently. They're still able to be engaged in their communities. They still have an active mind. They still want to get out and about and participate, but they've lost the freedom of driving the car. And by the way, most people, in terms of why they no longer drive, it's related to vision, not to cognitive impairment. That's not what, pardon the pun, drives. That's not what drives most people to the decision, I'm no longer going to operate my own vehicle. It's eyesight. And you can still have eyesight that is great for playing bridge and golf and doing the Sudoku puzzle, but it doesn't reach the higher threshold required for driving. And it's one of the more perplexing issues to solve, is the transportation issue. And I think that everybody has to participate in the solution. We as individuals have to understand the choices that we have in front of us and make about where we're going to live and how we're going to live. And community planning has to recognize the need for creating opportunities for people to live within very short proximity, walking distance, or very short, not cost-prohibitive taxi rides from the services that they need. Seniors that live alone, percentage that live alone, and last night at dinner, the Learning and Retirement folks were talking about one of the big issues, isolation and loneliness among seniors. And it's true that living alone is one factor of isolation and loneliness, but it's not the only factor that drives it. At the age of 65, a quarter of people already live alone. By 85, that number increases to 41%. But it still means the majority of people 85 and older are not living alone. They're living with their spouse or their adult child. And so getting the connection with other people is important, but it's the quality of that connection. My office undertook a very comprehensive survey of every public funded nursing home in the province. There's 300 of them. Nelson was included in this. We asked a series of questions about a whole bunch of things. And one group of questions was about the person living there and their sense of feeling engaged and belonging, and they're surrounded by other people all day long. And about half of them reported basically still feeling marginalized and isolated. So having other people around wasn't just the solution. So when we asked, is there somebody you have something in common with? No. Did people ask you your opinions? No. Do people know your life story? No. So having a person around in and of itself is necessary but not sufficient. We really have to remember that it's the quality of the engagement, and remembering that seniors, like everybody else, want to be heard, understood, and appreciated. And if we can make better efforts at that, that will chip away, won't eradicate isolation and loneliness, but it will chip away at it and make it a little less profound and a little less prolific. Seniors who are employed, from the age of 65 to 69, over a quarter of people are still working now. That number is growing every year. And it only makes sense because we are living longer, we are living healthier, and the other dynamic that's happening is we started our work life at an older age. So the senior, the 85-year-old of today, came of age in an era when you left school maybe at 16, maybe at 18. Most people did not go on to post-secondary education. And you started that lifelong engagement with work at a very young age. And so the number of years of working and contribution to pension plans and all of those kinds of things added up to the magic 44 years you have to pay into CPP to get the maximum. Well, you know, starting probably about 30 or 40 years ago, and even more so today, people are pursuing further education, people are expanding their horizons through travel, and people are not starting their meaningful employment until late 20s or even early 30s. And so the number of years that they're going to have to work and contribute to pension plans is clearly going to have to be longer. And I think we're going to have to come to terms with that around some of the federal and provincial policies that we have in place. Things like, we no longer allow you to contribute to CPP after a certain age. We compel you to start converting your RRSP to a RIP. All kinds of policies that I think governments are going to have to look at as we see this shift of working to a higher age. Canada, by the way, we have one of the lower ages for retirement entitled benefits. Most countries, most OECD countries are pushing the age up to about 67, 60, and they're slow processes, and they, by definition, have to be slow, but I think we're going to see that continues. Percentage that volunteer, 40%. Volunteer. Seniors are the most prolific volunteers. This room is full. This room is full of volunteers. I met the income tax volunteer people. I've met volunteer board members. I've met, I think everybody I've met in Nelson volunteers in one way or another. And in terms of the impact of seniors as volunteers on this province, I'm going to give you two numbers. $10 million a year is raised by hospital auxiliaries to support healthcare in this province by seniors. 10 million. $1 billion a year is provided in unpaid caregiving by seniors. They're providing it to their spouse or to their parents. If mom is 95, the adult children are seniors, and they're taking care of her. And so we need to understand and remember that seniors are not this problem to be solved and this cost curve to be bent. Seniors in this province, overall, to a tremendous effect, are living on their own. They're living on their own dime. They don't have that many of them. And they are giving back in tremendous and prolific ways to the communities in which they live, enriching those communities for everybody who lives there. And so that's the context and perspective of seniors in this province, of seniors in Nelson, that we have to keep in mind when we're looking at those proportion of seniors, and it's smaller, who have needs, and what is our obligation to meet those needs. So we went about a survey of seniors. It wasn't a random survey. The participants in this survey was based on a senior who had presented at an emergency department somewhere in British Columbia during a 2-month period of time about a year ago. And they agreed to participate in our survey, and we sent them out a survey that asked a whole bunch of questions, and they sent it back in, and we heard from about 2,000 people. And these are just some highlights, but they provide some interesting insight. So one of the questions we asked, where do you seek information on seniors' programs and services? Where do you go to find out that information? 39% said the internet. So that means that 61% don't find their information from the internet. Now think about how many institutions and programs are pushing everybody to online. You want to pay your bills, you have to do it online. You want to find information, you have to do it online. $100 a month to have internet and phone in your home. Forget Cablevision, right? If you just want internet and phone, that's what you're gonna, and let's remember that 20% of seniors who are on a household income of less than $20,000. That's not inexpensive. Let's talk about, then you've got to have the computer, then you've got to have the dexterity, you've got to have all of these other complicating factors. We asked seniors what kinds of concerns they have. Here's something that was very interesting. 68%, almost 7 out of 10 people who answered this survey are concerned about healthcare expenses. Now, this is Canada. Healthcare is free. We pride ourselves on it. It's our national identity. So what gives? Now remember, these people who answered this survey presented at an emergency department, and they are seniors. So what they're experiencing, or beginning to experience, is that as we age, a whole bunch of things that people like me, I'm 55, don't think about as a healthcare expense. So here's my healthcare. I might go to my doctor. I might go to the emergency department. I might have an x-ray. I might have a blood test. I might need an antibiotic. I haven't opened my wallet yet. But when I'm 90, I need somebody to help give me a bath. Can't do it on my own anymore. You know, I can't scrub the toilets anymore. I can't get the food in the house and cook it anymore. I can't, it's Nelson, I can't shovel the sidewalk snow anymore or clean the gutters. Not because I don't want to, but because I can't. I physically can't. Yet I'm, you know, I can still enjoy a good quality of life otherwise. Well, it's going to cost you a lot of money for that. I'm going to talk about that in the home support report. So 68% of people are very concerned about that. 58% of people are worried about being a burden on their family. And part of me says, why? That's what families are for. But we have to recognize what is a very North American phenomenon. You don't see it as much in other countries. And I think it's a reflection of a continent of immigrants, a continent where people are spread far apart, and a whole host of other things, is that we have not accepted, or we choose not to, the obligations to care for each other quite as much as some other cultures have. The culture in Canada that does do a very good job of this actually is the First Nations culture, where their appreciation of elders and their approach is very, very different from us. And there are some immigrant cultures, the South Asian and the Asian culture, where we see that a bit more. But we've got to talk about this burden on the family. And if we are the family who don't want to be burdened, we've got to figure out how we're going to take care, how mom and dad are going to be taken care of. 7 out of 10 people are worried about losing their independence. We really need to understand the fears that can start to creep in as you suddenly discover there's something you can't do for yourself that you used to be able to do, and that it's mission critical to do. Because people, in my experience in home care, people don't go from A to B overnight. The aging process is slow and incremental, and it's bit by bit by bit. And so, in the end, most people will not lose their independence. Most people will live in their own home. Most people will be able to stand on their own two legs for the entirety of their life. They may need a walker, but they're going to be able to. But they fear the fear that's there. And we need to recognize it and make sure that people have some confidence that there's some support there. Quality and affordable home care and care homes. 3/4 of people are worried about that. It's Canada, they shouldn't be. So that sort of segues into, in the introduction, talking about the report that my office just authored on the home support program. So we know, number one, most people want to live in their own home. We know, number two, most people do live in their own home. We know, number three, that up until about the age of 80, 85, most people are absolutely capable of taking care of pretty much all their needs in the home. But after about age 80 or 85, we do see that people's ability to do certain things, on average, not for everybody, but on average, starts to diminish. And so we have a program to support that. We call it the Provincial Home Support Program. A version of this program exists in every province in Canada. It is a program that is provincially funded, delivered through health authorities, and it is intended to help seniors remain independent in their own home through assisting them in what we call activities of daily living, ADLs, and a home support worker, community health worker will come to somebody's home, theoretically daily, help them get up in the morning, watch them have a bath, or help them with the bath, maybe do a little bit of cleaning up of things, and all the way to the full end of the spectrum where they can be there in the home when somebody is in their last days of life and helping them to die peacefully in their own home, which is how, again, what most people hope for. So in theory, it's a great program. So my office undertook a review of the program, and we looked at a whole bunch of things to test how effective the program is doing. The first thing we did was we sent a survey out to everybody who's receiving the care. And the surveys that came back painted a fairly optimistic picture. Most people were satisfied, for the most part, with the service they were receiving. But when we looked at who sent the survey back, because we can link it to their home support data, we found that it tended to be the people who had very low care needs. So if you just need somebody once or twice a week, the program is generally working for you. But if you needed higher levels of care, if you needed somebody every day, or twice a day, or 3 times a day, it wasn't working as well for you. The other thing that we looked at is who's not getting home support. And this is what was most revealing, and I think has been an eye-opener for all of us, because we weren't discussing this in the past. When we looked at admissions to nursing homes in this province, what you should find is that it's a progression. Somebody's living independently in their own home, no help. They start to need a little bit of help. You should start to see a little bit of help. You should see the help increasing to a point where it's just not going to work anymore, and that's when somebody goes into a nursing home. What we found when we looked at the admission data is that 61%, 6 out of 10 people admitted to a nursing home in BC had no home support prior to admission. 6 out of 10 had no home support prior to admission. When we looked at the 61% of people who were admitted, we found that 22% of them really didn't need a nursing home. They had some level of incapacity, and I'm going to use a couple of numbers. If there's any nurses out there, they'll know what I mean. Their ADL, or Activities of Daily Living score, was 2 or less, and their CPS, or Cognitive Performance Scale score, was 2 or less. The lower the number, the better you are. So on most days, my ADL score would be 0, my CPS score would be 0. Somebody who's a quadriplegic in a wheelchair would be a 6, which is the top. And somebody who is in end-stage Alzheimer's, nonverbal, would be 6 on a CPS score. So that gives you that perspective. 22% of the people admitted to nursing homes were either or 2 or less on both of those scales. There's no reason that person could not live in their own home with a little bit of help or in assisted living. And yet, there they were. So then we say, well, why is that? We started to look at the price, the cost we're charging people for the public home support. So BC is one of the few provinces that charges for this service. We've charged for eons. It's free in Alberta, it's free in Ontario, it's free in Manitoba. There's a bit of a co-payment in Saskatchewan and Quebec and one of the maritime provinces, but they're all much lower than we are in BC. If you're on the Guaranteed Income Supplement, the GIS, it's free of charge, so that's good. However, if you're not on GIS, if you're on the median income for a senior in BC is $28,000 a year. If your income is $28,000 a year and you need a daily visit of home support, just 1 hour a day in the morning, we are going to charge you $8,800 a year for your public home support on $28,000 a year. And you're living in your own home. You still got to pay for everything else. At $28,000, you still have a deductible and a copay at Fair Pharmacare. You still have to pay for your food, the roof over your head, all your supplies. If you have incontinence supplies, you're paying for them yourself. Everything you still have to pay for. You need the boost, you got to pay for it. Over-the-counter medications, you have to pay for it. If that person was in a care home, for them, it would be cheaper by about $14,000 a year to be in the care home rather than at home receiving the home support. But for us as the taxpayers, it's way more expensive. The average subsidy, public subsidy for somebody in a nursing home bed in BC is $4,300 a month. That would buy about 3 to 4 hours a day of home support delivered through the public system. If we gave client direct funding, it would allow somebody to effectively hire a live-in person full-time. But because we attach this co-payment calculation, even if we allowed client direct funding, most people are going to find they can't afford it, because by the time we take off what their contribution is expected to be, there's not enough money left over. The formula is intended to make you spend up to 50% of your gross income on your home supports. And so I think common sense has to say there's not enough left in the other 50% to pay for everything. And we make no distinction between the person with $28,000 and $100,000. The person with $100,000 does pay more because it's a percentage, but 50% left over from $100,000 is livable. 50% left over from $28,000 isn't. And so we're going to, the other problem in the rate calculation, we have something called the earned income exemption. So the number one problem is, if you're an average senior and you've got pension income, and that's where your income comes from, it's going to be very cost prohibitive for you. If you are a senior and you are or your spouse has any earned income, we call it, so basically employment income. It can be self-employment, it can be whatever amount of income you get, does not matter. The rate of home support that you will pay per month is capped at $300. So you've got a situation where the senior over here at $28,000 a year, because they get some CPP, they get a workplace pension, they get their OAS, $28,000. Their daily visit of home support is going to cost them $8,800 a year. You've got the senior over here with an income of $100,000 a year, but because part of that income comes from their wife is self-employed or they still have some self-employment income, they're only going to pay $3,600 a year. Their income is $100,000, they pay $3,600. Their income is $28,000, they pay $8,800. And when you look at proportionality, 28% of seniors are on GIS, 64% of home support clients are on GIS. You're 5 times more likely to use it if you don't have to pay for it. About 16% of seniors have earned income, and about 16% of the seniors on the home support program have earned income. So that tells us this $300 mark is about hitting right on the proportionality. And so the solution, we have to find some kind of solution that is going to have a rate we charge people much more relatable as a percentage of their income. In Fair Pharmacare, for example, it's 3%. So you're expected to pay up to 3% of your income for your medications, and then we pay beyond that. So looking at a progressive system like that, or applying the $300 rate cap to everybody, regardless of the source of their income, would be another approach to take. The other thing that my report looked at with regard to home support, so one big side of the issue is where is the program failing to meet the need? Well, it's failing to meet the need for seniors who are not on the GIS and don't have earned income, which is the majority of seniors. And they simply can't afford our public home support. The other area it's failing is the home support clients that are receiving service who have high care needs. So low care needs, we're doing a pretty good job. High care needs, not so much. So what we found was that about half the home support clients have very high care needs. They could be in a facility, but they're not, they're at home. On average, we're providing less than 2 hours a day for those folks, mostly because we're not providing service every day. And so we could be doing a better job of supporting those people and delaying admission to a care facility. Maybe not for forever, but certainly for a longer period of time. The other part of the review looked at the people that deliver the service, the community health workers, the home support workers. We've used various names over the years. And the new buzz phrase out there is health human resources. That's what we now call we've got to come up with a new phrase every once in a while. But effectively, it's the people that do the job, the people who do the work, community health workers. And what we found, and you probably will have some familiarity with this in Nelson, is that the service is very weighted to morning care, as you would expect. And so what you create is a profile of a job where a good part of the jobs are part-time, and indeed 84% of the workforce province-wide of community health workers is part-time or casual. And by the way, they're all in the BCGEU community subsector agreement. These are all unionized by and bargained for by a very large and sophisticated union. Yet we still see 84% are casual, 84% are casual or part-time, and about half of them are casual, although that tends to be driven by the higher rates in contracted agencies. And I think that we're going to see that change a bit with the repatriation of contracted work back into health authorities. And the other part of it is the wage rate. So when I started in home care 25 years ago now, we were just beginning to what I would call legitimize community health workers. They used to be called homemakers. We had no training requirements. Wages were barely above minimum wage. And we started about 25 years ago, moving slowly towards making it a more professional type recognized occupation. We started requiring training, and we started to provide benefits. They're good, they're government benefits, government pension plan. We started to make the wages go up a little. But what happened, there was a period of time, probably about 15 or 16 years ago, when we hit it about right relative to everything else. But what's happened is, over the last 10 years, the private sector and other wages have just taken off, and our folks have been left a bit in the dust. So to put it in perspective, a community health worker requires a 6-month training course, which they must pay for themselves. It costs about $10,000. It can be 6 to 9 months. When they get hired, they're going to be hired first as a casual, and they're going to get about 4 or 5 hours a day. And if they get more hours than 4 or 5, it's because they have split shifts and they're working extra days and all the rest of it. The person who gets hired on as the ticket taker for BC Ferries in the ticket booth requires almost no training. Any required training is provided by the employer, and they're paid 30% more per hour. And we want to think about the community health worker. They're going into mom's home. They know the lockbox number. They can see all her financial papers. They know she lives alone. They know who visits and when. They can see the calendar on the wall. They can chat with her. They have access to all her narcotic medications. Do we really want that person to be one of the lowest paid in our public service? Because that's the situation we have now. And it's getting tougher and tougher and tougher, because now, unlike 15 years ago, and this is not quite as stark in Nelson as it is, for example, in the Lower Mainland or some of the big resource communities. $21 an hour, $21 and change, which is the starting wage rate for a community health worker who will have casual status, who will get 4 or 5 hours a day. Well, I can go out in the Lower Mainland right now and I can get $25 an hour working Monday to Friday. We have record low unemployment. And so we need to think about how are we going to attract the responsible kind of people we need to attract to this industry. And I think part of it is the challenge of the industry. There's part-time, a lot of it is going to be part-time work, but we can make that much more attractive than we're making it. And there's a whole bunch of complicating factors that everybody will say, well, we can't do it because of this and we can't do it because of that. But if we started from the position that simply said, we have to make this work, and these are the changes, and we will make them, I think we would go a long way to creating the workforce we need to be able to sustain the increased demand that's going to come as more people want to live at home. And so in the recommendations to the government that the report made, first and foremost, we have to find how to make it more affordable for seniors who are not on GIS or in receipt of earned income, number one. Number two, we have to find a way to provide more service to the high-need clients. We're meeting the service needs of low need, we need to high need. We need to look at a client direct funding program that works with a focus on the high-need clients. And I articulate that by saying, think about if you went through the hospital. So we went through Kootenay Boundary Hospital at the people who are sitting there in bed because They can't go home and there's no visit. And we said to those families, we'll give you $4,000 a month to take care of mom at home. Do you think you can do it? Some people would say yes. Not everybody. But some people would say yes. And so I think we need to think about, particularly in communities, in the rural communities like Nelson and surrounding areas, because it's what's going to allow somebody to remain at home in the small communities that are smaller than Nelson, where you're just not going to be able to do this hourly care business. So we're going to need to think about that. And then certainly talked about the changes that have to be made to the labor force, that we need to look at incorporating training to be provided by the employer as a way of bringing people into the profession. And we need to look at how the working conditions and wages are going to reflect the value that we really need to place on these staff who are not just caring for our most frail and vulnerable, but they're caring for them in an isolated environment with no direct oversight. In care facilities and in hospitals, there's a lot of eyes on staff. There's no eyes on them in the home. And so we really need to have confidence in the people we put in those homes. And we have been very, very, very fortunate in this province to date that for the most part, that confidence has been validated. But when you look moving forward, if these become the lowest wage jobs in communities and are not seen as high value, who are we going to attract when you look at these opportunities? So these are some of the challenges that we have out there. But I think it's important to, again, remember context and get back to the beginning of my remarks, which is most of us, most of you in this room, are going to live, for the most part, a healthy life. And you're going to live independently, and you're going to be actively engaged for the entirety of your life. But we do have a duty and obligation to think about those people who will not have that good fortune. It is the minority, but it will happen for some people. And I think we certainly have the desire to make it better. And what we need to do is we need to get the support and mobilize the support so that we get to where we need to be to ensure that as we all age, we maintain our independence, as much independence as possible, for the entirety of our lives, and that financially we shouldn't be pushing people into care homes simply because they don't have enough money, but we actually are paying more to put them in the care home than we would be paying to support them in the community. So that concludes my remarks, and I'm not sure whether I'm absolutely delighted to answer any questions anybody might have, but I'm not sure what the program is for now. But I thank you very much for coming this morning, and I just want to tell you how fortunate you are to live in Nelson. Not just the obvious beauty of the natural surroundings and the charming core of Nelson that you have, but the people of this area and the volunteers and the immense desire for engagement and support of all ages, and the focus on the intergenerational, the work of Lee Reed that's happening around bringing multiple generations together. You're very fortunate, because when in those communities where people care for each other, you will have a much higher rate of success in living independently. So you can take heart in that, and that Nelson, while I'm sure there are many things that you wish you had that you don't have, and there are some things that can improve, you can take great comfort in the community you live in, particularly the people of the community and the care that they show for each other. So I congratulate you all on that. And I thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.